to that place in a regular pattern. So that's why it needs to be somewhere in the middle. Woodburn's pretty much in the middle. There is another way to do this that's done by other agencies in the state and everywhere, and that is what we're calling traded trips. And this is something that Chariots already does with Wilsonville Smart. And basically, each agency just runs their bus into the other agency's territory to the end of the line and then comes all the way back. So in this scenario, maybe the Route 99 bus would go all the way from Oregon City and Canby through Woodburn to downtown Salem and then all the way back. Meanwhile, Salem would be sending their bus all the way maybe to Canby, maybe to Oregon City, and back. So it'd be a very long route, but it gives people the opportunity to ride a long way without having to make a transfer. And it can be less complicated to manage than that pulse. There are some downsides. I won't go into them. But it can work, and it's working in the neighborhood, essentially, between Wilsonville and Salem.
If I can ask a question, Council President? Now, with our new routes that we discussed and are in the packet on page 19 and the very structured timelines every 20 minutes, it would seem to me that if you pause for 2, 3, 4 minutes in a pulse thing like this, you're going to throw that whole new brand new schedule and all this efficiency we just designed into a monkey wrench. Or you'd have to have more routes to have the same amount of 20-minute, have more buses to have the same amount of 20-minute route times. Is this going to throw a monkey wrench in all the planning that we're...
No, because it's something you can actually schedule for. So the way you do it is you say, well, this route, say, departs Oregon City at, I'm going to totally make stuff up now, departs Oregon City at 9 a.m., gets to, say, goes through Canby, stops in Canby, gets to Woodburn at, 11:30 a.m. It might be in the schedule that it sits there for 10 minutes to make the pulse, and then it departs and goes back up. And by the time you do all the math, you can still get to a fairly regular pattern. You count up how many minutes does it need to sit in Oregon City, how many minutes does it need to sit in Woodburn. It probably sits for a few minutes in Canby, and you get to your regular pattern. So, but part of why I can't tell you where a connection should happen, like should it be in Woodburn, where in Woodburn, is that you do have to pick the right spot if you want to get that regular hourly, this bus comes by at 10 a.m., 11 a.m., noon, that kind of pattern. You do have to pick the right spot for that to work. So this is the really fun part of transit planning, is this technical math that I'm talking about. But
I think my head was going the same way as Councilor Smith, so I'm going to ask a follow-up question just so that I can wrap my head around it. My question is, we go through the process of creating a schedule that makes sense to the riders and makes sense to the organization, and that is disruptive, certainly, to riders to have a new schedule that they have adjust to and adapt to. Is the expectation then that when we work with Chariots to develop a system that gets people more efficiently from A to B, that we would disrupt that system again and have to generate a new schedule? Is that where you were headed with that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Seems like if you insert 4 or 5-minute stops during the course of a day, and then you've got 35 minutes out of your day that's not as productive as the one you just efficiently planned.
So you're saying if this tidy schedule you're looking at were implemented like next year, then a year later would CAT go along and change it again? That's a question for Julie.
Yes. Yes. TriMet and Salem change their schedules every year. It's fairly common for systems to change their schedule, usually May or September. And we're just small enough that we don't do it very often. But bigger systems do it all the time. And the big change is if you change where the stops are. That really throws people. But people that ride transit are pretty accustomed to the changes in a schedule, especially if it's just a shift in time.
That makes perfect sense to me.
And if I can follow up, Julie, one more. So do we have enough, buffer in downtime when the buses aren't moving that, throwing in if they had 5 or 6 of these 5-minute wait times, and that it's not going to cause us to lose a lot of service time, travel time, if there's 35 minutes a day that buses are not active? Is there enough buffer in the current schedule of them to handle something like that?
We're basically buying a certain number of service hours, and so we'll allocate those service hours on the schedule, And the plan is to add some more service hours to the fixed route. And what we did with the contract with MV was that we are trying to reduce the number of service hours on the dial ride and add them to the fixed route. So it behooves us to make that change as soon as possible. So I'd like to see us make that first shift to make our schedule more even and more understandable to the customer. That's probably not going to happen before this thing with Salem happens. That will probably be later. So we'll probably make a shift first to our own schedule, sort of taking into account what's going on in Salem and that connection that we have now, and try to fix that in spots if we can, because that 4 o'clock hour, it's only a 2-minute difference there. You could get a connection if you had it. But I think the quick answer is I think we'll have to make a couple shifts. I don't see us making this one shift and then having a perfect schedule.
Also, if you waited for Salem to be ready to change their half, you would have to wait at least until 2019. Because they just made a major service change on their Route 99, Highway 99E route in May, and so they want to leave it alone for a little while and see how it performs. So you can either move quickly and make a smaller change, or wait a really long time and wait until Salem changes. So there's not really a Goldilocks option there. With regards to the extra time, that tidy schedule you're looking at is conceptual, and we haven't promised anyone that it's going to happen exactly that way, intentionally, because we knew that this was coming and that there would be a whole bunch of new considerations that we would want to take into account. And so we are going to actually continue doing some scheduling work with Julie this month and next month, and we will work on figuring out what can she implement soon that is yet similar enough to what we think will come out of this project that big changes won't be necessary when Salem is ready to move forward. Lastly, I want to say that the really traumatic thing that can happen to people when transit schedules change is if the first trip doesn't go out as early, or if the last trip doesn't come back as late. Because then you'll get a number of people who no longer can access the job they work, or can no longer access someone they need to take care of, or whatever it is. So as Julie makes changes, as long as she's maintaining that span of service or even lengthening it a little bit, most people are going to be able to work with those changes without it being terribly disruptive to their lives.
You give them a lot of notice, right? I mean, you publicize it. There's quite a process, right? Yeah.
Finally, her degree of success in making the Dial-A-Ride program more efficient means that she will be able to add some service to the Route 99 schedule. And so anytime you're changing schedules, but you are also adding more choices in when people can travel, that also helps to soften the blow a little bit, soften that disruption.
Councilor Parker?
Yeah, I'm glad that Tyler and Sarah can work on the schedule, because I'm not very good at that sort of thing. And I may not be very good at 30,000-foot level stuff, but that's where I dwell. And every night, one new person goes to sleep in Canby that wasn't here in the morning, and that's our growth rate. And that's not enough to be causing the traffic increase that we're seeing. The reason we're seeing a traffic increase is because our service industry cannot afford to live in Canby anymore, and we've got more and more people living further out in order to come into Canby. And we need to find alternatives to single-use vehicles, and this is one of the ways, because this is where this is going to be servicing our service jobs. And if you go up and down 99 or anywhere else in town, you will find every restaurant and every place is saying help wanted. And the people that are going to be filling those jobs are going to be living outside of Canby. Right now it's about 4,200 people that come into Canby every day to work on our jobs. And for us to have an integrated system that allows people to get to Salem, and with Salem here doing much of the lifting, And my vision, of course, is a seamless connection up to the Orange Line as well, from Salem to Milwaukee. But this is a huge step forward for us in terms of public policy addressing our traffic needs, and more importantly, more and more, and you know, when I got on this council, it was all about jobs. Let's get more jobs. The issue now is getting workers and getting workers into town. And there's only a certain amount of distance that people are going to be willing to drive for a minimum wage job. And so having transit options like this, I see as being a key element of a strategic goal of ours, which is to have enough people to fill the jobs that we already have here.
And I'd like to add something to that, which is there's only so far that you can ask someone else to drive you to your minimum wage job and then come back 9 hours later to pick you up. And one of the things that happens if people don't have a car, they may choose not to have a car because of the expense, and so someone else gives them rides places, well, that ends up being actually twice as much car traffic as if they owned and drove their own car. Because it's a there and back when they start their shift, and it's a there and back when they finish. So that's a way to think about the value of having a transit option or cycling or other options, is you're reducing even someone getting a ride from a friend, as wonderful as it is that they have that network, that's actually a lot of environmental impact on your city to have all those people getting rides from friends and from family. Also related to workers, I wanted to talk a little bit about Woodburn. I would imagine there at least has been and maybe will be some sensitivity about running Canby buses paid for with Canby dollars into other cities that are ridden by other people who live in other cities and who maybe don't even work in Canby, and so therefore aren't contributing to the service. So I want to encourage you to think broadly about the usefulness of the service, right? The service is not just useful for people who live in Canby, it's also useful for people who own businesses in Canby and need to attract workers. It's useful for people who live in Canby who want to access educational opportunities outside of Canby, like Clackamas Community College to the north or Chemeketa Community College to the south, which is located in both Woodburn and East Salem. So there are many reasons that it's beneficial to you to have overlapping transportation access with your neighbors, and a very strict accounting of, well, we pay for it, so only our residents / taxpayers should be riding it, will tend to limit the freedom that your residents, your employers, your businesses experience as they try to move around their community. So I want to encourage you to, as you've been doing, keep thinking broadly about why you run this service at all. Specifically in Woodburn, I think it's possible that we will find that it really makes sense to move the end of your bus route from the edge of Woodburn, where it is today, at the Bi-Mart, closer to the center of Woodburn. The colors on this map, you don't need to know exactly what they mean, but the darker the color, the more people and jobs and activities are in that space. So right now you are getting your bus route close to Woodburn, but not actually into the real heart of Woodburn, where all the activity is. And in particular, Chemeketa Community College is right smack in the center of Woodburn, and lots of people go there for things, and you're not getting people there. And that's an opportunity. I've been asking Clackamas Community College, who's been involved in all of these processes, hey, how much, they know things about who goes to which community college, and I've actually used them to learn about how much people use multiple community colleges for their educational purposes. They said quite a lot. They said they have many students who attend both Clackamas and Chemeketa. They have many students who attend both Clackamas and Mount Hood. So, I'm aware of Chemeketa Community College and downtown Woodburn as a really strong anchor for your service. And so I'm interested in seeing if it's possible to have that stop closer to the center of Woodburn, but I'm also aware that that could be sensitive, because that would make it even more useful to people who live in Woodburn, don't pay taxes in Canby, to use your service to go to Oregon City. So I recognize that this is a complex issue, but I just want to tell you that it's something we're going to be thinking about, and thinking about whether it's worth it to you, despite that sensitivity, to consider running further into Woodburn.
I'd be curious to know, when we maybe in the future, if we talk about that more, I'd be curious to know more about that details, because coming from Hubbard and from that basic community there, you'd have a hard time convincing me that the transportation center of that whole region is not the corner there of 99 and Bimart that goes out, towards the, I forget what the cutoff road is there. It's a highway number. But for purposes of transportation, nobody drives downtown Woodburn for transportation. There may be a residential community that is highly populated there, but nobody. It's not good roads. They're tiny, narrow roads. There's not a lot of large businesses there. There's a lot of houses. But, so I'd be curious to know where that data came from and more about that if we get into that further.
Well, here's how I'd encourage you to think about this. Think about the walking distances to things at the corner of 9090 and Mount Hood Avenue, and compare that to the walking distances to things in Woodburn. Because that's what, this map is showing density, so it's showing the amount of stuff in a geographic space. There's a lot of stuff out near the Bimart, but it's all very far apart, which means that if you get off a bus there, it is a very long walk to your destination. Whereas if you get off a bus in the center of Woodburn, it is a short walk to the library, it is a short walk to Chemeketa. Density really matters for transit ridership because when people get off a bus, they're almost always walking that last bit of their trip. And the lower the densities, the farther that walk is. So I completely agree that Mount Hood and 9090 is a very busy place with lots and lots of car traffic, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get a lot of transit ridership, because people will get off the bus there, and the walk to anywhere but the Bimart is a really long walk, and possibly also a difficult and dangerous walk. So that's the difference. In terms of the data, this is data from U.S. Census, and it's updated in 2014. So like all those businesses on 9090, this is a map of density, and so they don't show up as brightly colored because, yes, there's a business, but it's surrounded by a quarter-mile of parking lot that a person getting off the bus has to traverse on foot. That's what the colors mean. One more thing, Woodburn is kind of congested. As you mentioned, the roads are narrow. It's a pain to drive through. Well, guess what? It's a pain to drive a bus through, too. Today, the agency that drives the bus through Woodburn is Chariots. Isn't that nice of them? But if you just stop thinking about who runs which bus and you just think about the trip, you want someone to be able to go from here to Salem reliably. It doesn't matter that Chariots is driving through Woodburn and you're not. That person's trip is still difficult and unreliable and whatever it is, because eventually they get on the Chariots bus and then they drive through Woodburn. So for the sake of the corridor, for the sake of freedom to travel along the corridor and the access that Route 99 provides to Salem, it doesn't matter that CAT isn't driving through Woodburn, because Chariots is driving through Woodburn and it's a unified product. So I will also possibly be pushing you to drive further into Woodburn, accept some of the challenges of driving further into Woodburn, because for your customers who are going to Salem, it doesn't matter whether it's you or Chariots who's driving through Woodburn. They're going through Woodburn either way. So, and of course, any cost, any plan that comes out of this, there will be cost-sharing arrangements that are fair. So I'm not suggesting that Canby's doing any kind of charity here, but just that there may be ways in which some of the usual considerations about, what our agency does, it has to be good for our agency, those start to blur when you're talking about running a unified corridor service that is one product for your customers.
Yeah, and the mileage driven is going to be, I think, a material factor, but occupancy and ridership, not so much, because it costs the same amount of money to drive an empty bus as it does to drive a full bus. And so I think really where we would wind up with the decision process is if we found at a particular location that a Canby resident couldn't get on a Canby bus to go to a Canby location. I don't think that's likely given the average ridership on any of these lines.
Right. Finally, I want to say that there's already a consortium of transit agencies doing this exact kind of thing in Oregon. It's called the Northwest Oregon Transit Alliance. This is a little map of what they do. They run Portland, Clatskanie, Astoria, down the coast all the way to Yachats. and Lincoln City to Salem. And they put a lot of work into coordinating. They do those pulses so that their buses are at the same place at the same time. They offer a unified fare pass for weekends and for a week at a time. They have lots of great arrangements that make it easier for people to use two agencies' services as though they were one service. So we are looking to them as an example to learn from what they do. The other piece of good news is that the transit bill that the state legislature passed, in the legislation, there are like 6 bullet points that offer some guidance for what they want the transit funding to do. 2 of them have to do with providing seamless travel across agency boundaries. So I also think that Canby and Salem are positioning themselves very well to take advantage of unknown potential future grant programs that might reward this very kind of collaboration with additional funding dollars. Now, I don't know that that's going to happen, but I'm just reading the tea leaves of what's in the legislation. News on that from the state will come in 2018. And that is my summary, the highlights of the 99E study. These images are taken from a about 30-page PDF report that is mostly pictures, not very much text. And if you would like to read it, we'll be happy to send you a PDF of it.
What's our confidence level that we will be able to do something with Salem?
That's a great question.
I actually talked to, I can't think of his last name, Hal, the Public Transit Division.
Oh, yeah. Hagedorn?
Yeah, the director. Anyway, I talked to him just yesterday. I went to a meeting about the Rules Committee where they're making the rules for the new funding. And he talked about a portion of the money being set aside specifically for this kind of service. And I was explaining to him that we're doing the 99E corridor plan, and he said that sounds like it's custom fit for that funding source.
That's encouraging.
That was very encouraging to me.
And so assuming that there's willingness on our part, you're sensing there's willingness on Chariot's part as well?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
they pretty much initiated this.
Gotcha.
They wrote the grant, and they just asked us to share in paying a part of the match. And so I think they're it came out of their recent plan that people wanted to get all the way to Oregon City from Salem along the 99E corridor. So they have, their constituents are wanting this as well.
And then I really shouldn't get ahead of myself, but we would love to figure out a way to also make connections with Wilsonville work better as part of this. That said, triangular pulsing is really, really, really tricky.
It's exponentially
It's
harder.
tricky to design. It is exponentially harder.
Yep.
It's tricky to design. It's even trickier to maintain. So I don't know that we're going to get Canby and Salem in quite that deep. But that long term, that's what you see here. You see, not just a line, you see a network. And I think that's what will really be good in the North Willamette Valley eventually. Oh, that's a big job.
Did you have a question, Tracy? No. Okay. So the purpose tonight was just to brief us on where you're going. You're not looking for direction tonight.
We're not, and
Okay.
we're consulting stakeholders I'm actually going to be at the Thanksgiving dinner on Saturday night, recruiting stakeholders. Yeah. And also, I love that Thanksgiving dinner. And then we'll be consulting stakeholders in January and February, and then putting out some recommendations after that.
Great. So look forward to spring of 2018-ish.
Right.
Sounds good.
One more time.
One time. Any other?
We'll see you at the dinner on
See you
Saturday.
at dinner on Saturday.
That's great. Thank you for coming. Any other questions for Julie or Michelle? All right. Well, we need a motion. Rick has just handed out to you the most recent text.
I would love to, as the Transit Advisory Committee liaison, I move that we adopt Resolution 1276, a resolution adopting the 2017 Transit Master Plan for Canby Area Transit.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Councilor Height, seconded by Councilor Spoon to pass Resolution 1276, a resolution adopting the 2017 Transit Master Plan for Canby Area Transit. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And it carries 6-0. Thank you, Michelle. Julie, thank you. You're the greatest. Yep. Thank you for the hard work, the great plan, and your patience with us. I sure appreciate it. You're awesome.
As chairman of the advisory committee, I'd just like to make some comments, and thank you for that overcoming. I was on the council in 2001, and we had one bus come in.
Yeah.
And I wasn't satisfied. She made one circle, left town.
Yeah.
We looked at this map, that you see there, of what Astoria and Tillamook run into Portland, and we thought, how can they do it? And so out of that, you can see the progress that we have made. We have now a fleet of 15 buses. Not all of them are on the road at one time. For the month, for the year, we've had 14,000 riders, and we're just responding to people's requests. Yeah. Evidently, we've done something right, because now they're coming back and say, can you expand? Yeah. We want to go to the Red Line, and we want to go to Salem, and so that's why we're working on it. So again, we appreciate your vote of confidence, and we'll keep you informed of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Walt. Thank you so much. That is amazing. One bus to now we're looking at tying together half the valley. That's awesome. Thank you. Next up, new business. Do we have any, Kim? No. And now city administrator's report.
Nothing more.
Nothing more. My goodness. One more chance for citizen input. Do we have any citizens who wish to offer input? All right, seeing none. Action review, Kim.
You have adopted Resolution 1273, and you've approved Ordinance 1468 to come up for second reading on December 6th.
Very good. And City Attorney Joe, do we have an executive session tonight?
We do not.
Very good. Kim and Rick, is there any more business that needs to come before us tonight? Hearing none. Canby, have just a really, really blessed Thanksgiving season. And count your blessings wherever you find them. Everybody has some, even in the darkest times. You can find them. And so just have a really, really great Thanksgiving on behalf of the council and the mayor. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second? All right. It's been moved by Councilor Hensley, seconded by Councilor Smith that we adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Carries 6-0, and we are adjourned. Thank you, Canby. Good night.